A huge welcome to everyone that's joining us. My name is Shannon Baldioli. I use she, her pronouns. I am an educator at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. I am currently the manager of youth and teacher programs. So I spend my time working with our field trip programs, camps, and professional development. So excited to see everyone here. Just to give everyone the heads up, we are recording this and we'll be posting it to our YouTube channel later, so you'll have access to that. Please feel free to reach out to myself or to Drew, who's going to introduce himself in just a moment. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along. And Drew will also be sharing a one-pager later that has some of the links that we're going to talk about during the presentation. So just a quick introduction. Aerial archaeology is our education monthly theme at the Air and Space Museum. Each month we choose a theme that sometimes coincides with an anniversary or an artifact in air and space history. This month we dug into aerial archaeology. And each month we have those theme pages on the website. Drew just dropped it in the chat for us. So this kind of goes along with that monthly theme, although we'll talk a little bit more about aerial imagery than we will about archaeology this evening. There's lots of blogs and stories and some other things you can do to check those out in the link in the chat. So I am going to hand it over to Drew Humphrey, who's going to lead us through the first part of our program.
Hi everybody, I'm Drew. My pronouns are they, them, and this year I'm working with NASM as the Teacher PD Fellow after spending 12 years as a K-8 STEAM educator in Oklahoma. The first time I connected with the museum was through Teacher PD, so I'm really excited to be here on the other side sharing with you. Just a quick overview of our agenda for the night. We're going to walk through a few interesting, pivotal maybe points in the actually very broad history of aerial imagery. We have a guest speaker here to share about his experiences as a helicopter-based photographer working for a local news affiliate. We have some classroom teachers here to share about their experiences getting started with aerial data collection and photography. Then we're all going to put on our student hats for that activity Shannon's been mentioning. We're going to do some perspective taking and think about local neighborhoods. And we'll wrap up with a Project Zero thinking routine to help us, kind of dig in deeper on the perspective taking aspect of tonight. So for this brief history, what I really wanted to do was highlight a few stories and museum objects that are related to our topic for the evening. Aerial archaeology is interesting because you have two kind of separate fields, right? Flight and photography. But in this topic, we get to see how they intersect in really interesting ways throughout history. We're going to start with just a really broad working definition of aerial archaeology, which is the use of imaging and remote sensing to help us make sense of the science and history of specific landscapes. We know the museum theme is archaeology, and we said we're going to talk a lot about imaging because really those processes are the same, whether you're looking for scientific information or historical information. So we wanted to really highlight how broadly applicable these things are. So thinking about that definition, I'm going to ask you to share in the chat again, what air and spacecraft can you think of that might have been used to help researchers gather these aerial images? Let me give you just a minute. Feel free to drop as many answers as you can think of. What ways are we gathering aerial data? I see kites, drones, weather balloons, Landsat. Oh, I just 3D printed a Landsat satellite today, so I'm extra excited about that one. Space shuttles, military reconnaissance, the International Space Station. These are all great answers. Balloons, drones, yeah. You guys hit the nail on the head. So we're going to start kind of at the beginning of this story with hot air balloons. So as you mentioned in the chat, hot air balloons are kind of the first gateway into this topic. This painting is in the NASM collections. It's a painting of Montgolfier's first manned flight, which happened in November of 1783. And hot air balloons kind of became a cultural phenomenon. They swept across Europe and the United States. And while they were doing that, photography also was born and the invention of what we consider, modern cameras and photography. And by 1860, those two fields kind of joined together. And we see here this photograph, which is the oldest surviving aerial photograph of Boston. It was taken by James Wallace Black in 1860. So even though that was a really brand new application of technology, we see this taking off. And hot air balloons were used with photography for reconnaissance in the American Civil War, and it just kind of continued. As you all know, though, hot air balloons have some of their own specific safety concerns. And I have my favorite story actually of the night. Around the turn of the 1900s, George Lawrence began specializing in aerial photography and taking like big panoramic views. But actually, in 1901, he fell out of a balloon cage from 200 feet above the ground. Fortunately for him and kind of for all of us, his fall was broken by the telegraph and telephone wires about 30 feet up, and he landed unharmed. But as you would with a near death experience, he very quickly pivoted to find newer and safer ways to gather his photography. And that gave us the Lawrence Captive Airship, which is a series of up to 17 kites and a stabilizing device that George Lawrence used to capture images. Like this one, a panoramic image that he gathered from his captive airship of the city of San Francisco after the earthquake in 1903 and the subsequent fires. So this is about 6 weeks after, and you can still see a lot of devastation. Um, this is part of the panoramic photo series that the Library of Congress has. So it was really exciting to be able to find this picture from that long ago. And then very shortly after that, we begin to see humans taking to the skies in new ways with powered flight. And by the 1920s, planes were the new it thing. And pilots and passengers contributed to several important archaeological findings. One of my favorite is the Nazca Lines in Peru. This was really our first chance to get that overhead view and start making sense of these giant drawings on the desert surface in Peru. And it's been 100 years since that, and they're still finding more. So it's really cool that the evolution of flight was how we were able to learn so much. Engineers quickly realized that this aerial view was great for photography, and they began to design planes specifically for that purpose. This plane here is the Abrams Explorer. It took its first flight in 1938, and you can see its big bulb on the front. It was designed for aerial photography and surveying purposes. 1938, though, you could already see on the horizon the possibility of World War II looming. So the military decided that the better plan would be to convert faster fighter planes for reconnaissance missions than ones like the Abrams Explorer. That trend has pretty much continued into today. This image is a Lockheed U-2C, which was used in the Cold War era by the United States. U-2s have also been used by NASA to gather stratospheric samples on high altitude missions. Um, and some of these photos that were gathered by U-2 even on highly classified reconnaissance missions during the Cold War have now been released. And archaeologists are using these declassified U-2 photos to help them learn more about those regions. So this picture here, you'll see the like circular structures and the bands going out from them. These are desert kites, which were believed to be used by prehistoric hunters in eastern Jordan to trap large size game like I think gazelles. Uh, And then we went even further and we took it to space with the Landsat program. This has been running continuously since 1972. It is a joint effort between NASA and the US Geological Survey. Currently circling our planet is Landsat 8 and 9. They gather data every few days from like the same location. They circle the Earth and are continually gathering that data, which for us is really cool because that data is all available to us online. And some of it has even been compiled into these GIFs where you can really engage students in some what do you notice? What do you wonder? Other types of thinking routines, but with an animated GIF that shows change over time. This example is of Cairo being moved to a new location out in the desert, but there are also pictures of glaciers and pictures of algae bloom in lakes. So there's all kinds of phenomena that you can study thanks to this Landsat data. If you are really interested in archaeology and you want to focus a little bit more on the history specifically, this month's episode of STEM in 30 takes a deep dive into both classic and more modern tools of archaeology. They go to Jamestown and take a look around there and talk to some archaeologists. You can find this video on our YouTube channel. Links to that and all of the artifacts that you have seen are in the one pager that I will drop into the chat towards the end of our evening together. And you noticed one glaring omission in my history. I didn't mention anything at all about helicopters because for this section, we're going to welcome our guest speaker to talk about his actual firsthand experience with aerial photography from a helicopter. So our guest speaker is Matt Ron. Matt spent the last 5 years working as an aerial photographer for a local news station in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Through his work, Matt logged over 1,000 hours on Sky News 6, the station's helicopter operation. And we're so excited to have Matt here tonight to share with us some stories and the ways that gaining a new perspective from the air helped him in his work, but also helped benefit his community. So welcome, Matt.
Hey, Drew, thanks. Appreciate you having me on the professional development tonight. I've already learned a lot of cool stuff about aerial history. I didn't know that about hot air balloons and things like that. It's funny, we actually did a story with some NASA U-2 pilots a couple of years ago up in Salina, Kansas. We interviewed them and talked to some University of Oklahoma weather researchers who were partnering up with them and doing some of that stratosphere weather research. So, Oklahoma weather is a big deal. So it was really cool. We didn't get to take a ride in the U-2, but it was pretty cool aircraft. Yeah, like you said, Drew, I just got a recent new job a couple months ago, but for the last 5, 6 or so years, I was a aerial cameraman, I guess you could say, reporter, and kind of jack of all trades, drone pilot, kind of did all sorts of stuff. And 5 years, I flew with our pilot here in Tulsa, covering all sorts of crazy news. So yeah, basically for all those big events that we've covered over the last several years, I was in the back seat of our Bell 206 helicopter, and I'm just now realizing I'm not including a good shot of that on our show. But if you want to Google it, you can look it up and take a look at what it looks like. I actually brought some show and tell though. So I would sit in the back seat with, I don't know if you can see my little screen, but I brought a little, my control board. So I would sit in the back seat with this control board and cover all these breaking news events in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I thought I'd kind of break it down in 3 kind of major categories. There's a lot of stuff we've covered over the years, but a lot of the big events break down into natural disasters, historic moments, and some unexpected fun, which is my favorite. The little image there on the screen now is a huge. What happened was there was a tire facility, like a tire recycling plant, just outside of town that had caught fire. So like thousands and hundreds of thousands of tires caught on fire, causing this huge plume of smoke. And a shot like that, really being in the air, gives you just this perspective that being on the ground can't. It really gives you like a broader perspective on the story. So I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll show you kind of under the natural disaster category. A big thing we do in Sky News 6 is cover severe weather. So this is an image of just after the day after a tornado swept through Sulphur, Oklahoma. And this was actually just earlier this spring, during like a pretty historic tornado outbreak in the state. Um, and being up in the sky covering tornado damage like this really gives you a unique perspective. Being on the ground is certainly moving and dramatic and wild to see, but once you get a broader perspective of the damage and you can actually see the path a tornado took through a town, destroying, flipping over cars or destroying roofs or pulling trees out of the ground, it's really humbling to see how powerful weather is. I think you can go to the next slide. There might be one more. There's another image of another tornado in Barnesdall, Oklahoma, just I think a week or so after that other tornado. And you can see, all you can see is a bunch of mangled trees in this picture and empty foundations. All those little concrete spots there where it's just dirt, those were once homes. So you can easily see from the sky, and it's hard to see on the ground, but once you get up in the air, a few hundred or thousand feet in the air, you can see just how devastating storms like this are and the damage they can cause. I think the next photo is some flooding. That's another big event that we covered over the last several years. Back in 2019, there was a huge flooding outbreak in the state. And we would cover that for hours. We flew for several hours a day during this flooding event, just seeing these communities really torn up and devastated by flooding. And again, being high is just another way to see something like that. And it gives you this broader idea and really shows you the impact of events like that. You can go to the next slide. This kind of gets into like the historic moments and kind of ties in a little bit of the aerial archaeology. This isn't really aerial archaeology per se, but we got a firsthand view of some archaeologists here in Tulsa who were investigating mass grave, 1921 race massacre. Obviously a huge event over 100 years ago now. And back in, I think, 2021, they started excavating some of these mass graves just here in Tulsa. In a graveyard, a lot of unmarked graves. So I think there's another image on the next slide. We just got, an aerial view of these people working and these people excavating these graves and really bringing to light a very horrific and tragic event that happened in Tulsa over 100 years ago. That was for a long time kept secret and didn't took 100 years for people to really start looking into it and giving it the respect and the attention that it needed. So really just being in the sky for events like that is pretty powerful. I guess you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. This is kind of where it goes into the unexpected fun. We're flying around, the state hours at a time, covering breaking news that is hours away. So there's a lot of downtime. And when you're in the sky for that long, you start to notice random little things and little different treasures that, you would never see driving around. So for example, the top right image is someone had mowed the word "hi" right into the grass. And so, what we do is like we'd post a picture of that and we'd say, hey, back to you too. And sometimes we'd actually connect with these people. Like in the image in the top left, this was a really cool story. I wish I had time to, show you the whole story on this. But we were flying back from breaking news, and I noticed all of a sudden these two kids, they were like 8 and 9 years old on horseback, and they were waving at us. And I told the pilot, Dustin, to whip around, and we whipped the helicopter around, got some video of them waving at us. And they found us on Facebook later, and we actually were able to go and visit them and do a story and talk to them. And they were just the cutest cowboys, real serious, real Oklahoma cowboys. And it was, just something like that you don't expect to see. And it just really brightens your day and gives you a brighter outlook after covering, devastating and hard-hitting news. There's some other images. Obviously, the Goodyear blimp, we saw that a couple times come through Tulsa. Bottom left is a random Ferris wheel in the back of someone's yard that their neighbors may not even know exists, but we know it's there because we're flying over it. Um, so I think that I don't know if I don't think there's any more slides after that. I know that's kind of a lot of stuff. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Kind of, blew through that, but happy to answer any questions or talk about anything else people want to hear about.
Thank you for sharing those things, Matt. I love that you gave us like the really well-rounded, like it's not all about natural disasters, it's not all about history. Sometimes it's about the fun too. Anybody that has any questions for Matt, if you'd like to drop them in the chat, we have a few minutes set aside for some Q&A if you've got anything you'd like to know.
Also, while people are creating questions, I just want to give a big shout out to my mom, Michelle Ron. She's watching tonight. She's a big space nerd, Air and Space nerd, and got me into that sort of stuff too. So I just want to give her a shout out. I guess that kind of answers maybe the first question. What led you into this field?
Yeah.
I kind of got into it by accident. I started at News on 6 as a digital producer doing website things. And one day, when I started at that job, my dad was like, "Oh man, News on 6 has a helicopter. You got to figure out how to get in the helicopter." And I'm like, "No, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm not a pilot. Like, there's only one cameraman. That's like not going to happen." But a couple years later, the current cameraman at the time, quit, and they asked me to do it. So that's kind of how I just fell into it and stuck around for a few years.
I have a question related to that. Had you ever flown in a helicopter before starting to work at New Six?
No, that was my first time, and I was pretty nervous because they were, the pilot when we first started had been there for decades, and he was in the National Guard and kind of an intimidating guy, and he was like, "Well, you ever been in a helicopter before? Like, you better bring a scarf sack
Art
with
bag?
you or whatever." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." So the first time we got in there, I brought like a Walmart sack to up in the air with me just in case, but it was smooth. I kept everything, kept my lunch, so it was pretty exciting to go into a helicopter for the first time. What's your favorite thing taking a picture of from the helicopter? Oh gosh. There's so many things that come. Uh, I think one of my favorite things. Well, what we did every year was like compile a compilation of everyone waving at us from the sky, like those cowboys. Because our helicopter had a big six on the side, and all the graphics, so people recognized it and could see it. And so, like over the years, we got like probably hundreds of people waving at us and got a lot of good video of people waving. My own parents, I got on there one time, and just like these cowboys and different people like that, and little kids or adults. And it's funny because like in my mind, they know they're waving at the helicopter, but like who knows if we even see them or not. So it's kind of like a cool happenstance that we actually are looking at their spot when they're waving and get it on camera. So that's kind of cool. Discovered a significant archaeological site or anything interesting while flying. Archaeological site. I don't know if we, you know, covered any historic moments or broke the news on any archaeology in Tulsa. I think, but yeah, certainly all sorts of interesting stuff like stuff corn mazes and things like that cut into the ground. One of the most unique things was we actually like came in contact with another aerial imaging device. We have a lot of uh, we have a lot of people who are interested in flight and stuff at our station. And they at one time were on FlightAware, which tracks like aircraft in the sky, and they saw this. It was a hot air, like a weather balloon, and we were doing research on it, and we ended up like getting in contact with this like weather balloon expert, like at Baylor University, and we tracked this weather balloon for days and finally like got video of it coming down out of the sky, and he was able to help us track exactly where it was and it was just like whatever this aerial imaging company was obviously didn't want anybody to know what they were doing, or like some private company collecting data for who knows what. And
Right.
we're out there with the news helicopter like tracking it, and it finally landed in these random trees in the field in the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of cool. Uh, did you start taking photos from the air, change your perspective on something? Um, I think going back to like uh, storm coverage and storm damage, like really getting that broad perspective of natural disasters definitely humbles you and things like that. I think when you're experiencing a natural disaster on like a on your own level, it's obviously a big deal, but when you see like the big perspective, it definitely like makes you realize it how big of a story it can be. Do you harbor any secret wishes you'd like to photograph someday? And that's interesting. Secret wishes. Well, it's cool because like with this, we're flying around in this helicopter, and we get to peer into people's backyards, like there's Ferris wheels in people's backyards, or different things like that. I don't know what I would really want to photograph, but I'm trying to think. One thing was cool that we got to photograph um, one time, which is something that you really never would able to get a chance to photograph on camera, is the Marine One helicopter. The president
Ooh.
was visiting town,
Mhm.
and typically when the president is in Marine One, you there's like a no-fly zone ordinance around a several
Mhm.
mile radius, so you would never be able to get video of that aircraft. But it turns out the day before his visit, I guess they had brought Marine One to Tulsa and were doing like test pattern flights around the city without the president.
Oh,
And so we were able to get like some cool shots of that. And it's just something that, like an aircraft you probably would never get to see uh, otherwise if the president was in it. So that was kind of cool.
that is cool. Yeah, those no-fly rules are very strict. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing, and thank you for giving us extra time to answer our kind of weird random questions.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right, we're going to take a step in a slightly different direction, and we're going to hear from some of our teachers to talk about aerial data collection. The teachers we have here for you tonight are from the museum's Teacher Innovator Institute. It's an intensive professional development opportunity, and applications happen to be open right now. So if you are a STEAM or anything related to STEAM teacher, then you would like to kickstart some professional development this summer and really learn some new fun things, we encourage you to check it out. Shannon just dropped a link in the chat, and we'll get started with Jeff and Maggie introducing themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Monteith. I am at New Hampton Community Schools in Iowa. I have kindergarten through 12th grade in a variety of different things, STEAM-based. I also do our extended learning program and kindergarten through 4th grade science or computer science. So a little bit of everything and a big science background. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Hi, I'm Maggie Hattasall. I am in the Wichita, Kansas area. Currently, I teach 5th and 6th grade STEAM at an intermediate building. Previously taught 5th grade science and then general 5th grade. Lots of kind of experience with nature, camps, and getting kids involved in science.
All right. So when we started talking about kites or aerial photography, I'm a big kite person. I love all different types of kites, from traditional fighter kites to 2 lines to 4 lines to everything like that. And so when they started talking about aerial collection on kites, I kind of chimed in. I'm like, hey, I'd love to do something with kites. And so that's kind of how I got started with what we call CAP, or kites, kite aerial photography, especially in the classroom type thing. I've used kites in the classroom to do all kinds of different things, from kids making them to flying them, to do traditional fighter kites, and a little bit of everything that way. So, I guess one question becomes, why CAP? Why do we do kite aerial photography? Drones have become a big thing. Before that, kites were kind of the way to do that. The big difference between drones and kites, though, is that there's fewer FAA requirements than in drones. For example, how high you can fly, where you can fly, things like that. National monuments and stuff like that are no-fly zones, where sometimes kites are allowed in some of those areas with permission and things that way. It's a little less intrusive. People like the fact that they can see that there's a kite in the air and they can follow the line and find out who has it. They don't feel like they're being spied upon as much as if it's just a drone kind of flying around. And it can be a little bit more cost effective. One of the things with the drones is you buy the drone that has the camera attached to it, and that's kind of the camera you go with. So if you get more expensive cameras, you're going to get more expensive drones and things like that. Where kites, the nice thing is you can kind of attach different cameras to it and make them do the work for you. So that was kind of what I started exploring with. So different types of kites that can be used. The first one on the left, there's a Delta. That's one that I've used to do different pictures and stuff before. It's the nice thing about a Delta is it self-adjusts the wind. The tails help keep it kind of stabilized that way as well. This one happens to be a 6 foot, so I use this one with smaller, but they can come up to 12 foot and bigger for the kites that way. And that's one that a lot of people are familiar with. The next one, the Delta Conye, in the pictures that Drew shared earlier, that was that same style. And so what they've done is they've basically taken a Delta and a box kite and kind of combined them together. The nice thing is a box kite's kind of like a big lifter. I always think of it kind of like the biplanes with the double wings and being able to lift things up that way. And then the side wings to help support it. The middle one there, the soft parafoil, this is actually a image of one of the kites. I couldn't get my kite to get a picture of it that day, so this is just a stock photo of one. But these are soft ones. Some people like these because they can fold them up, put them in your backpack, and go with them. There's no hard sticks necessarily with them, so they're a little bit more flexible. They can use them to lift things in the air with a lot of power that way. The next one over is a sled kite. This one is kind of like the parafoil, only it's got two sticks kind of running down the sides of it with the tails on it to help stabilize it. This one I haven't used to lift. This is actually one I use to teach my kids in the classroom to make. Because you can make it out of garbage bags and like window shade bamboo. So you can make lots of kites for really cheap and they fly, whether they're running with them or actually flying with them. So that's kind of one I like to use. But then I've also taken that and scaled it up and used like a big tarp and created out a tarp with 4-foot dowels. And it works really well to lift things that way. And then the last one is my favorite one. That's the Roku kite. It's kind of a traditional Japanese kite. I use this one. The photographs that we're going to take a look at today, this is what I use. So it's a 6-foot tall kite. The nice thing about this is that you can really adjust it. So if there's not much wind, you can change the flight angle to collect a lot of the air movement. If there's a lot of wind, like there has been when I took some of these pictures, you can go the other direction and kind of deflect some of the air so it doesn't pull as hard. So that's been one of my favorite ones because it's a little bit more adjustable. As far as other equipment besides the kite, a camera. And so when we first started talking about this, I hadn't done much with kite aerial photography just because it used to be kind of expensive in order to get the cameras to lift up and things like that. But as we got to talking, I thought, well, I have some old iPhones. So what if we put the old iPhones on the camera or on the kite and start flying those? So that's kind of how this got started. So you can see there's an iPhone connected to it. It's actually an iPhone. I think it was a 6. I mean, it's an older one. And then it's attached to it's called a picave, which is basically a cross piece, and that helps stabilize the kite. And you can see the lines running across the top. Those help so that as the kite goes up and down and changes the angle, the kite stays smooth underneath it, and it helps prevent kind of the swinging effect that will sometimes happen. You can use a video camera or videos or in the still mode as well. You can use an app like a time setting app. One I used was Timer Plus. So you could set it to take one picture every 30 seconds or one picture every 60 seconds and take 50 seconds or 50 pictures while it's in the air. You can also use gimbals. And this was the one that kind of scared me away from kite photography originally because they can put radio controls on it and you can get it to pan and tilt and do all the different things connected to it that way. But what I found out is even just attaching. So in this picture, that's a cross piece for plumbing that came out of the hardware store for about $5. And some screw eyes that are put in it and actually hair ties that were used to hold it to it. So I think there's probably less than about $10 invested in this entire thing. So these are some of the pictures that I took. Some of these came from the phone that was just shown on the other. I also 3D printed some picaves that worked really well so it could hold the iPhone or something similar to like a GoPro camera in it. So I decided to focus on my school area, thinking that we could create an archaeology site within this area. So the top view here, you can see this is our press box at our football stadium. This was one the Vivitar action camera. It's like a GoPro style. So it was hooked up and it wasn't flat. It was more of an angle so you could get the front view of it. On the left-hand side is a picture of our stadium at night. Our activities director was kind enough to turn the lights on for me so I could do some aerial photography at night. So this one is the kite was at about 300 feet above the ground on the kite on the left, or the picture on the left. Gets the track around it and the football field there. On the right one, that was taken during the day. So the goal was to try to get the entire football stadium field. Unfortunately, the wind was at a bad direction, so we didn't have as much room to back up as far as we wanted to. So my oldest son was out there helping me. And in this case, what I wanted to do was to be able to see what we were taking a picture of. So I put my phone on the kite, and we were supposed to test it with a older phone first, but we didn't have time. So I just put my phone on there. And then he FaceTimed my phone. And so uh, we turned mine so that his FaceTime was actually seeing what my phone was showing this direction. And then as I was flying around, he would take pictures on FaceTime using the front facing camera on mine. And that's how we could see what we were taking pictures of. So we got the idea that we were going to try to take the picture of the entire field. That was our goal. And so we kept going higher and higher, and it started losing focus. Well, then as we got up there, the wind picked up, a little front came through, a few raindrops started to happen. We were on the top of the metal bleachers, and it was starting to get a little slippery. And so we decided we'd give up at the 10-yard to 10-yard yard line as we're climbing down the bleachers. And it's kind of, the kite's pulling us pretty good at different times. He's got a hold of the line, and I'm trying to pull it in. He drops the line a couple times. Luckily, it doesn't get away from us. So we finally get the kite done, and his comment, he looks at me and he says, "Why don't we ever have normal adventures together?" So it was kind of a fun thing to do with him as well. So this is an image that we took at night. So my oldest son didn't go with me this night. I made my younger one go with me this night. Same thing. This was using the iPhone. This one is actually on video mode. So I basically flew for about an hour and filmed the entire thing, and then went through and took snapshots from the video of things that I liked. This one I thought was an interesting as we start looking at having kids ask questions about photos. So when you look at this photo, you can have them start to ask questions about different things. So, they might notice that there are two vehicles parked over there on the side. One still has its lights on. You can see kind of the handicap spot parking at the top. You notice that there are little white spots on the field. What are those about? What are those for? They're actually drain things, but that would kind of get them started interested in talking. Also, the same thing with like the different parts of the track. You can see the handicap parking makes for some interesting photos as well. There's two kind of roads leading down there. Where do those go? Getting to ask that. You can see that there's a ramp next to it that for the handicap parking as well. So it just kind of gets them to start thinking, and they might realize that there's a person walking in the middle of the picture. That was my son that said, "Why don't we have normal adventures?" He had to come and check it out, what we were doing that night. So I think he was kind of hooked to it as well. So, and these are just some other ones that you never know, kind of depending on how you're doing it. The FaceTime, you know what you're getting. When I sent, we sent the FaceTime kite up one time, or FaceTime with the kite with one time. The next time I sent it up with a timer app. So it just took pictures every 30 seconds, and we just kind of flew around to see what we'd get. The top left one, we were flying around, and it was taking pictures every 30 seconds. And I saw somebody walking on the nature trail right outside the stadium. So we decided to fly over them and see if we could get a picture. And they were rather interested in what was going on. So they were watching the kite, and I don't know if they realized it was looking down on them as well. But interesting, you can see the shadows. They were out walking their dog. So you can see the shadows of the dog in the background with them. And then that's a native prairie area that my kids had planted several years ago on the left. So just kind of giving a different look for the school area. On the right, this was another accident one. I just had the GoPro style camera filming, and it was kind of pointed up at the sky, and it kind of swung around and got a cool picture of the top of the school. And you can see the water tower in the background and the flag and stuff like that. So kind of a surprise when you're looking, but kind of a fun way to do it as well. On the bottom left, that was my son standing at the 50-yard line in the middle of the field looking up as he was controlling the FaceTime camera. So the first view was from about 300 yards or 300 feet, and then we zoomed in so we could see that part of it. The bottom right one, so this is talking about how things change over time. The left one was taken on a Saturday, and it was interesting because you can see the track and the numbers and the shot put pit, and it had these red tables, so it kind of had a flash of color, changed things up that way. And so then on the right, when we went back out at night, I went to get a similar picture, and I went back through what I had collected, and I couldn't find it and couldn't find it and couldn't find it. And so I put the two pictures next to each other and kind of scaled them down to be the same. And you'll notice that the red tables are gone. The custodians had actually collected the tables during the week between when I'd taken the daytime photos and the nighttime photos. And when you zoom in, you can actually see the tire marks from where they were turning and taking them as well. So kind of an interesting way. The last time we went up in the night, I knew I basically had one time opportunity that our flight director or our activities director let us do it. So I had 2 iPhones on there, a small 1-inch camera on there, and then the the Pocket Lab as well. And that's how I used the Pocket Lab to know I was actually 300 feet up in the air. I had 450 feet of line out, and then the kite ended up to be at a altitude of 300 feet. So it was kind of neat to be able to see what your reading was that way as well. Like I said, when Drew sends out the one pager, there'll be a lot of there's some other information on there, some other pictures of the pick-a-vays, of the 3D print, and then I even tried to do a pick-a-vay out of popsicle sticks and paper clips that would carry like a 1-inch camera up on a smaller kite. So just some kind of fun with kite photography.
All right, well, I'll jump in here with kind of a different perspective as far as using kites in the classroom. So if you're not wanting to go more of the camera route, the way that I kind of went with this was more data collection. So in the Wichita, Kansas area, it's really big with aviation. And so I was looking for ways to connect aviation into my classroom. And this summer, when I was at the Teacher Innovator Institute, we were able to shoot off some rockets. And so I was thinking how cool that would be. And we could talk about aviation with that. And then I looked at the price for me to buy 300 rockets and was not going to pay that. So was kind of trying to come up with other ways to get some aviation connection. And so one of the teachers while we were there had shared how she used kites and GoPros in her classroom in Arizona. And so kind of got this ball rolling here. So what I ended up doing was using kites and Pocket Labs that Jeff had mentioned, which are small little devices that can connect them. You can get information about like barometric pressure and altitude and light intensity and different things like that. And so this spring, my plan is to take my students out and to collect some data there and just kind of see what we're able to kind of talk about. And so these were my test runs. I dragged my husband out to the field by our house to do some testing. And so this was looking at the barometric pressure as the kite was rising up into the air. And so on the Pocket Lab, you can kind of track, how high up you're going, and you can see how the temperature changes and the pressure. And so just trying to find ways to get authentic data into the classroom is really important with kind of my age group with, getting into middle school, being able to look at that data and kind of see it. You could even with younger students in elementary school, I think would be, definitely able to do this as well. You just obviously would tailor it to what they're looking at. My connection was kind of with Earth systems. So we would be talking about how weather is created and how these differences in pressure lead to different changes in the weather. So we obviously get lots of great weather here in the spring. And so being able to connect that way. Was even thinking we could look at the data that we collected and then compare it to what the local weather station is getting. And so we can have that conversation about how those are different. Well, why would their weather be different, compared to at our school? And how is that perspective change even just in town, how we can have different weather in different places? So lots of kind of cool ways to connect that. The big ones with the kite, I kind of played with a lot of the Pocket Lab sensors. Acceleration is a great one. You can see, especially when the kite starts whipping in the air, how the acceleration changes. Temperature was kind of interesting to see as it was going up, especially when it got into really getting picked up by the wind. You could see how that temperature changed. So you can have that conversation with students of why is the temperature changing in the wind? And then humidity and barometric pressure as well were kind of connected. As the higher you go, those are able to change. And so really kind of just looking for ways to pull in some data in a fun way. I would be curious if I asked my students how many of them have actually flown a kite before. And so even before we get into actually flying them, we can talk about the history of kites and, how they've been used in the past and how we're able to use them today. And so really could kind of be a cool conversation to have with students.
Thank you, Maggie and Jeff, for sharing. In the one pager, I'm actually going to go ahead and drop the link since we've mentioned it and I don't want to forget because that sometimes happens. We have a couple of little lesson plans for activity ideas to use kites in your classroom. As Jeff mentioned, he shares a little more in detail about how to get your kite rigged up and ready for some aerial photography. And then we have lessons with both kind of that historical focus and creating an archaeological dig site in a field wherever you have access to that. and also using it in some science explorations. So those are all in the one pager, and it includes contact information so you can reach out anytime if you want more information on that. But let's jump in to activity time. I'm very excited.
All right, y'all. Matt and Drew and Maggie and Jeff, thank you so much for sharing. That one pager's got lots of stuff in there. We shared the monthly landing page, so we've got lots of lesson ideas. But this is an activity that I've done once with students, and it's a really fun way to think about perspectives and perspective taking. So we're going to do this little activity together and kind of chat about it. And then we're going to wrap up with a thinking routine that's literally about perspective taking and putting yourselves in others' shoes. So as I was thinking about this, I figured we could try it. And we've seen that seeing things from above can change the way we understand them. Matt talked a lot about kind of seeing the broader picture when it comes to natural disasters, understanding a little bit more. So let's do a little creative visualization, make it steamy, right? We are going to do an activity about getting a bird's eye view. So everyone can grab that paper and pen or pencil that they had with them. And we're going to think about a space. Drew, you can go ahead to the next one. We're going to think about a space that you feel like you know pretty well. I chose the neighborhood where my high school was, and I'm going to have you all think about that place. It would be ideal if it isn't a place that you look at on a map all the time. And I want to challenge you to draw that from a bird's eye view. So think about you being the Google Maps tonight, and you're going to sketch what you think the neighborhood maybe you live in, the neighborhood your school is in, looks like from above. So I dropped in here some prompts that I've given to students when I do this activity. As you're working, think about scale, think about details. What are your landmarks? I started with my high school, and I'll show you those photos in just a few minutes. And then thought about the things that were kind of around it. And I honestly had to start and stop a couple of times on this one. But I'm going to give everyone about like 5 to 7 minutes to do your little to do sketch. So again, you're thinking about your neighborhood, your school neighborhood, and doing kind of a bird's eye view, making yourself your own hand-drawn little Google Map sketch. And then I'm going to share the ones that I did and compare it to one my younger brother did for me. I've voluntold him to do it this morning as well, and think about how that went and how that might work with students. So I'm going to give everyone about 5 to 7 minutes. Go ahead, sketch away. So this is a wonderful activity to do as you're thinking about looking at things from different perspectives. I was lucky for a little while to work at the National Building Museum. And when we talked about plan, section, and elevation drawings with students, we had them take a bell pepper and draw it from the outside. Then we had them cut it in half, sort of through the middle, and look down on it and draw it, and then cut it in half, sort of like a floor plan view, and draw it, and take some different perspectives. So this is really similar to that, where you're having them think about something that surely they see every day, but from that kind of bird's eye view. And it really helps kind of think about, especially scale and shape. You can talk about maps and map making and how that works. Yeah, I really love those wonderings and noticings about seeing flowers and planters. Definitely could be really challenging for students with some of those motor skills and challenges with looking at things from a different space. It's totally fine to scaffold this with students actually looking at maybe a Google Maps image and thinking about what they notice. It might be a great way to start with just kind of like a bare bones map image. I went to school in Warren, Ohio, at a place called Howland High School, and it is right across the street from the Giant Eagle, which is the local grocery store. But I realized that the Giant Eagle is not the same size as my high school, but I drew it that way. And then I also realized there's a pizza place on either side of my high school. The one over there on the east side of my high school was definitely where we would go grab pizza at lunch when I was a senior. But I asked my younger brother to draw the same thing. And as I said, his is actually turned slightly So you see the high school kind of in the middle there. He drew the baseball and football fields behind it. And then, just like me, he wrote Giant Eagle and assorted stores next to it. So he was sort of seeing some of the same things, but he put some of the neighborhoods in behind and beside my school that I forgot were even there and didn't think about the fact that there were actually neighborhoods there. We lived a little ways up the street. Um, there is a podiatrist on that corner. His attention to detail is really, really stunning. But if you go down one, you can actually see what that space looks like. The next slide, this is the sort of bird's eye view there. You can see that the school is actually not right across the street from the supermarket, but it's just the way that I remember it and the way I was sort of envisioning how easy it was during our summer PE to run across the street and grab some chicken nuggets from the Giant Eagle. But you will notice there are still 2 pizza places there. So as we start, this is just the not the terrain view, the kind of plain stripped out map view there. We didn't zoom in close enough to get the podiatrist office, but it is there for sure. So this is just a great activity to get kids thinking about looking at things from different perspectives. And we've been talking about physically different perspectives, right? But I'd love to wrap up our session this evening thinking about engaging with things from different perspectives. And as we debrief, we're going to talk a little bit about perspective taking and use a thinking routine. Many of you are probably familiar with Harvard's Project Zero thinking routines. I use them a lot in my practice. Visual thinking strategies and routines are used a lot in the museum world, but we've been doing the PZ thinking routines, which I can drop the link for the toolkit in the chat. We've been using them with teachers for quite a while, and they're a really wonderful way to get students anticipating these, making thinking visible and working to show their thinking. Perfect. So Drew said it's in the one pager. So thinking about how students see things from different perspectives can be really helpful. And I'd like us to kind of zoom out and think about aerial archaeology with a routine called 3 Whys. So this is a thinking routine about perspective taking, and it asks you to answer 3 questions, 3 why questions. Why might this topic, we're going to think about aerial archaeology. Why might aerial archaeology or aerial imagery matter to me? Why might it matter to the people around me? So they give you some samples there, your friends, your family, your city, your nation, and why might it matter to the world? So I see in the chat defining personal space and how it relates to public space. That can be a really great discussion with students about different land use categories. In so very many ways, you could talk about that from a economic perspective, from a historical and cultural perspective. Yeah, using this to think about after a hurricane or another natural disaster, as Matt was saying, it's a really great way to kind of take stock of everything. Lori, I really like your world impact as well. Drew was talking about Landsat earlier and being able to track things like glaciers and algae blooms. Students are able to really get a big picture. Yeah, see how your students realizing their place in the world and how small a place we occupy in the world, but how important it is for us to take care of it and think about other perspectives and other humans. Yeah, thinking about how deforestation works. I really loved the GIF that Drew shared earlier on the development of Cairo as the city got too big to kind of hold as many people as as it was holding. They built a new Cairo, and you can kind of see that human expansion and development there as well.
Someone also mentioned like why people live where they live. And in those declassified U2 photos, there's also you can like track the movement of villages along like marshy areas in Iraq. And I think that's like a really interesting, like kind of modern history, but to like watch that movement even in the present day. It's fascinating.
So Drew shared a link to a couple of things earlier, and I just wanted to point out that the kind of graphic that I'm using for this thinking routine is one that I pulled from Smithsonian's Learning Lab, which is a platform where we can share, where Smithsonian objects are cataloged and you can search them and create collections. But we also have had a bunch of amazing educators and other folks across Smithsonian create collateral like this. So you can grab some of those thinking routines in this really nice graphical way. That's a little bit different there too. I also saw that Lisa shared some NASA resources that are also similar to this project too. So you've got some another government informal STEM powerhouse coming at you with some amazing resources for your classroom there. Thanks so much for taking some more time to chat with us out of your day.